Hey guys, this is Raz, and before we get started talking with Laura Fillault about her time as a director for the Township of the Woodlands here in Texas and how she got elected there, I want to give a shout out to one of our campaign coach alumni. Dr. Byrd came out and absolutely crushed it. He won by a 10% margin with record turnout against a 12-year incumbent. He's somebody that absolutely just took everything he could out of our time through my campaign coach's advanced candidate course and did a wonderful job. It was a textbook campaign. He raised money. He knocked over 5,000 doors himself. He just got out there and got after it, connected with his voters, and I'm so incredibly proud of what he did. We've talked about it some on the Facebook page and around, but I wanted to give him a shout out here on the podcast. We're so excited about what he's going to be doing here, getting sworn in next week and working for us for the next couple of years in the Fort Worth City Council. So congratulations, Dr. Byrd, and let's get to talk to Laura Fillault about her time on her council there and down in the Woodlands.
This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason, to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Raj Schaefer.
Welcome to the How to Run for Office podcast from My Campaign Coach. Thank you to Campaign Sidekick for supporting this podcast. Go to campaignsidekick.vote to find out how their best-in-breed voter contact platform can revolutionize your campaign and help you win. This week, our guest is Laura Fillault of the Woodlands, Texas, where she is one of the township directors, a city councilman by any other name. I met Laura several years ago at one of the redstate.com gatherings here in Fort Worth and have enjoyed tracking her political involvement throughout our friendship. She's someone who is a comfortable activist and a mom, but felt called to step up and run for office about a year and a half ago, back in 2015. Laura is just one of my favorite people to hang out with when I'm down in the Houston area, and a wonderful person. She's a rock-ribbed conservative who has learned so much about politics through her own efforts and learning the hard way, and she wants to serve her community and make it a better place to live. Laura, welcome to the podcast.
Howdy, Raz. How are you?
I'm doing so well. It's a pleasure to talk to you every chance we get. Enjoy talking on and offline, and we haven't got to see you in a while, even though you're up my way and didn't give me a call a few weeks ago, which I will begrudgingly forgive. But I'm really excited to have you on here today. We love talking to candidates and folks that are city councilmen and run for office and do such great work, and I'm stoked to have you on here to share some of your wisdom.
Thanks. I like being here. Glad to share it so that other people can do this, because we need good people running and they don't want to. It's a scary thing.
It can be scary, but let's start out talking about how you got to the point of running, because it was a long road. We've known each other for God knows how many years, 6 years, something like that. And you definitely at that point, there was no thought of running, at least not apparent in our conversations. But you've been involved in politics for a long time. Kind of give us a little bit more of just your story in general.
Okay, so it probably starts 5 years ago. In 2012, we moved from Sugar Land to the Woodlands because we were part of the ExxonMobil migration. ExxonMobil built their campus. My husband works there, and they migrated all the offices up this way. And at about the same time, my daughter was getting into kindergarten, so she's my youngest, and there was sort of this 6 to 7 hours of free time that I had. And I decided I needed to get involved in something. And I had been on Twitter before that. And so this is kind of where I learned a lot about just general politics. When we lived in France, so my husband's French, and we lived in France for a little while. I had not paid very much attention to politics. You know, I was the presidential voter.
Right.
And felt very proud about doing that.
Every 4 years, baby.
Yeah, every 4 years I show up and I'm looking at the ballot going, I don't know. You know,
there's like 30 other races on here. What do I do now?
Exactly. Yeah. And
straight ticket.
All the nonpartisan races, I never voted in. So, and I didn't understand the whole capitalism, socialism, republic, democracy stuff until after we moved back. And because then I'd experienced the other side, and there was a lot of, me in France going, okay, we don't do this. You know, I'd watch the electric company is nationalized, and I'd be like, so they would go on strike because they had talked about reducing their wages by 1 or 2%, and it was just, I couldn't really wrap my head around nationalized utilities, first off. And, I'm used to regulated and non-regulated or deregulated, but not nationalized where, we have the post office, right? Not anything.
Yeah.
But then we also have supplemental companies like FedEx and UPS. So you can kind of sit there and go, well, okay, yeah, post office, but that's for little stuff. If you really need it, you'll send it, these other ways. So there is no other way. There's no competing electricity company there. It's EDF, it's EDF, it's the Electricité de France. And that's it.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so,
one option.
you have the option. So I just wasn't used to all that or thinking about that kind of stuff. And so we moved back, Sugar Land 6 years, then up here to the Woodlands. So it wasn't until about 2012 when we moved up here. And there was a moment, I'm friends with a guy, you may or may not know him, Stephen Cox. He was in the Houston area, or actually I think he was out in DC at this time. I don't know. And he was one of the guys that was really helping Ted Cruz raise money for his 2012, 2013-ish campaign.
Yeah.
And so Stephen and I had gone to A&M together as we were both engineering students there. He was computer and I was industrial. And so we knew each other from that. And we sort of connected over Facebook and, like you do. And Stephen just texts me or sends me a little note, says, hey, check out this guy, Ted Cruz. Because this was back when he was barely at 13%, against David Dewhurst.
Right.
No one knew who Ted Cruz was. And but he made the runoff. And he had come to there was an event that the Tea Parties here in the Woodlands had, and it had Sarah Palin came to speak, and this was after the election, but before she got crazy. So Sarah Palin came to speak. She's kind of off the rails, right?
Yeah.
So Sarah Palin came to speak. Jim DeMint, and I knew who Jim DeMint was at this point. He came to speak, and then some dude named Ted Cruz that Stephen had told me about, but whatever. I wasn't there to see him. I was there to see Sarah or Palin and DeMint. And so, we're sitting in this thing, and it's a Tea Party rally, and I didn't really understand the whole Tea Party, but I was learning all this stuff. So we go, and Cruz is kind of a really good speaker, and he's saying really good things, and I'm like, I like this. And so I think it was July of 2012, he wins. We were actually I think we'd given him $10. So we got an invite to the watch party.
Yeah.
Invite everybody, right? Pack it out.
Right.
So we go to this watch party and he wins. And we're like, whoo, this is kind of cool. And I meet actually Gordy and Michelle Bunch with the Tea Party here in the Woodlands.
Right.
And, Michelle's like, come check us out and whatever. So I don't really do anything with that because I want to, make sure that the kids are settled. Juliet was starting kindergarten. This was a new school for Zachary. He was going into second grade, that kind of thing. So I sort of, again, still watching Twitter, still learning just about just politics in general. Because I'm one of those people where, I don't just learn about something. I have to, dive deep.
And that's the engineer side of you coming out.
Yeah, exactly. I want to know all the details.
Yeah.
So so we go through, and so probably about, I would say maybe March of 2013, I start kind of attending the Tea Party meeting. I walked in, honestly, right, as the first time I walked into a Tea Party meeting, and I didn't know what to expect because, they're portrayed, this is back when I still kind of watched television, they were portrayed as, these rabid racist people or whatever. And I bust into that room. I'm all right, I'm going to get in here. So I walk in, I open the door, and it was my grandmother times a million. I looked at my very first thought was, I just lowered the average age by 20 points easily here. And they're all retirees, super nice grandparents. I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, this isn't what I thought it was going to be.
But they not what they said on MSNBC.
No, yeah. I'm looking for the Confederate flags and everything, open carry. No, this is really just, a bunch of, older people. And started attending the meetings. And what was fun about those particular meetings at the time were all the local politicians would make their way into at least one of those meetings from time to time. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden I learned the value of being at those meetings and meeting these guys, right? Our local county constable is a good friend of mine. Our state senator would come, state rep would come, Steve Toth would come. He was the rep at the time. County commissioner, judges, all these local politicians, right? And all these local people that are good to just know, when you have a complaint, you can call them. If you have a compliment, you can call them. And so did that, helped organize, got involved with the Tea Party, helped organize. Jim DeMint actually came back and spoke and helped organize his kind of the event. And so, kind of dipping the toe in the water sort of thing. And then met Steve, actually person to person for the first time, Toth, like October, November timeframe of 2013. And he snags me and he says, hey, you're going to run. Now this was kind of closer to January. So we have a coffee and, and then about in January sometime he catches me. He's like, hey, you're going to run my state Senate campaign. And this is the first time I've ever done this. I looked at him and I said, no, I'm not. I've never done anything like that before. And I was like, because I had done nothing with politics before. And he said, no, come on, you'll be great. And so I did. So I was, because, I was like, I don't have anything else to do really. So, January 2014, I start running his political campaign and running Steve Toth is like trying to herd 50 cats, but it's just one guy. At that time really started, by then paying attention to politics, knowing who people were, following all the cool kids on Twitter. And that March, I went to CPAC. And at first, so I went in as an individual. It even literally said on the little ribbon, like individual, basically like you're the lowest in the totem pole here.
I am alone.
Yeah, exactly. I'm alone and I'm not affiliated with anyone or anything. And, so I go in.
Come be my friend.
Yeah, please. So I go in and I sit down into the, the big ballroom that they have there. And I kid you not, the first 4 people were like, Ted Cruz, I'm like, heard it. Governor Perry, heard it.
Right.
I think Mitch McConnell came out. This was the one where I think Mitch McConnell gave, Lindsey Graham or somebody came out and gave like this really pretty rifle.
Oh yeah, the old yeah.
Musket. Yeah, exactly. So that's that one. And after a while, it's by like 10:30 in the morning that first day, I'm like, I'm over this.
Yeah.
Because it was stump speeches. It was just stump speech after stump. And I couldn't understand why people wanted to come to this. I'm like, all you have to do is like turn on the TV and you'll get this. So I go out and I go up to my room because I'm staying at the Gaylord because I knew nothing at that point. And so I stay at the Gaylord, getting a drink of water. I'm like, okay, God, I don't know why you've brought me here, but please, can I show me what's going on here? Yeah. So I go back downstairs and I kid you, I'm a huge National Review fan, huge. And I come around the corner and there's Rich Lowry standing there and I'm like, because I fangirl ridiculously with all of these people.
Going all fangirl on the NRO guys.
It's terrible. So I walk over and I'm playing it cool, right? Inside I'm like, but like on the outside I'm like, hey, do you know Stephen Cox? Because I knew Stephen and Rich knew each other. And he was like, no, yes, I do. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. He said you might be here. I'm Laura, la, la, la. It was really great to meet you. I really enjoy National Review. He's like, great, nice to meet you, whatever. And then I learn about Radio Row.
Uh-huh.
And this was back when actually at CPAC it was still really cool because Radio Row was full of all these people that I followed on Twitter. It was like Larry O'Connor and Dana Loesch, and I met Chris, and Dinesh D'Souza's walking around, and I'm talking to him. At the time, this is before he kind of went, and we had a lot of that, and just National Review people. I would see them walk by, and I'm just like at one point I stood and talked to Jim Garrity, and he'll laugh now, but I was just like, oh my God. Inside, I'm like, hey, how's it going? And I don't talk. And I mean, total, like just big old hearts in the eyes sort of thing. So I do that. And then, so then in May, Kimberly Kay held in the Woodlands what was called Right Online. It was an Americans for Prosperity organization. I guess they had been doing kind of blog cons or something like this, something similar. Again, I'm a total newbie.
Right.
And so, I just know this. And so what was so fantastic for me, Miss Fangirl who loves to build networks and relationships, it was CPAC condensed into all the cool people that I really, really like, and like none of the crowd and none of the politicians, right? So this is all the conservative circle.
Yeah, so Larry, action, actually getting something done, learning and networking.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting there talking to Kevin Williamson like we're best friends, talking to Jim Garrity, meet Charlie Cook, Thomas LeDuc, Fingers Malloy. At one point, I'm sitting at the FTR radio little desk or table that they've got there, and Fingers and Thomas are behind the mic, and so I'm sitting there talking to them. Larry O'Connor's there, and then up walks Kurt Schlichter, Steven Cruiser, Tony Katz, and Jim Garrity, and I'm just like,
you're about to lose your mind.
Like I'm soaking in this, right? Of like, oh my gosh, I love and respect all of these people, and I'm hanging out, and like we go out that night, and Jim Garrity's sitting next to me, and I'd emailed Jim a couple times just to ask him a couple questions about, can you help me with this or whatever? I don't understand. And Jim leans back in his chair, and it's all of those people, and then some, right? Yeah. And Kimberly Kay, Brandon Morse, Lawrence Jones, everybody. And, he leans back and he goes, you know what, Lauren, I liked us. And of course I'm like, I'm an us, so.
Well, I mean, that's such a great thing about, about some of these conservative events and just the people that make them up is, and that's how I built relationships, how you have, Ashley McCulley and others and all of our friends that we had talked about and that you just mentioned. These are just people. And, we see them on Twitter. We read their stuff on NRO and The Resurgent and all over the place. But the fact is that they love helping people. They love helping get more people involved and just helping more people be effective in conservative politics. That's what so much. That's what you do so much of meeting new people, and what I try to do with helping train new folks as they're getting involved. The idea is that this is not about a personality. This is about a movement, and it's about conservative policies and trying to advance these principles we hold in common. And there are some a-holes out there. There's some the pretentious ones that want to be the cool kid and think that it doesn't stink. But the fact is that the vast majority of these folks that we get to work with, it's just absolutely awesome just to go meet some of them at these conferences and communicate with them and help each other support the movement. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it really is. And it's all inclusive, right? I mean, you really have to be a jerk to get kicked out. We'll let you in, just be cool. And, if you think you're better than everybody else, then we're not going to like you. But if you're just awesome and normal, we're like, come on in, And I really have to, I actually wrote an article or a blog post a million years ago. I'll fast forward a little bit. So I did the CPAC, I did the Right Online, and then that year, both Red State and AFP Defending the American Dream were in Texas. So I hit 4 conferences from March to August, right? So I'm seeing the same people over and over again and meeting a few new people, Ed Morrissey and that sort of thing. And I'm one of these people, if you're my friend for life, and I will act like we've known each other for 1,000 years. And I will tell you stuff that you were like, I don't even really know you. And I'm like, no, it's fine. I'm happy to tell you. So I actually wrote an article that said, thank you, Breitbart, for, Andrew Breitbart, for my adopted family. Because he was a key figure for a lot of these people that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Right? And he kind of created this whole come on in sort of deal. And fast forward, so, and as you meet these people, you get encouraged to stand up for conservative values, right? You see them doing it regularly. Yeah. Or they're talking about it, or they're writing about it, or they're speaking about it. And it's just like, I'm not alone. And yeah, what he said. And then you can go replicate that in your own local politics. And that's one of my big things is get involved locally. So, and I preach on that sometimes and I get a little wordy, but whatever. And so, fast forward, we make the runoff barely, and then we lose Steve during the state Senate campaign. I learned a huge, all kinds of great lessons, and I'll talk about some of them in a second. And, but I also became one of those, I became known as one of the local conservative loudmouths, right? Mm-hmm. And I'd proven that I kind of got it. I understood, conservative policies and politics and that sort of thing. So fast forward to early January 2015, there was a road bond here in town that was very controversial, and it was not going to be good for the Woodlands. It had let's just say 88 different line items for the whole county. Mm-hmm. And one of them we wanted taken out. We're like, just don't do this, and you can have the rest of it. Well, the county commissioners, so we knew that was coming in the pipe. So I got the call. I'm like, okay, you're going to come meet with the other loudmouth conservative politicos and, and that sort of thing. And in the meeting, they said, we need somebody to go talk to Commissioner's Court tomorrow. I hadn't done anything like that yet. I had only been engaged in attending the tea parties and these conferences. I hadn't actually been an activist yet. And so I said, okay, well, I'll go talk. And that was one of the most intimidating things I've ever done is, I've spoken in front of, I had knock-on-door access to the vice president of drug development for Johnson & Johnson. I sat next to the deputy tax minister of the Australian tax office. These were my projects. But this, standing in front of county commissioners, was intimidating. And I don't know why, but it's just that whole kind of government thing. And so I go and I tell them, hey, just take this one thing off. Well, they vote on it that day and they vote to not take it off. And we're all like, oh, hold up, what's in this bond? Because we hadn't really read the bond. We just knew there was this one thing that we didn't want in there. Yeah. So then we start combing through it, and I get the studies, and I'm reading the traffic studies, and I'm like, this is going to kill our community. So anyway, we're like, well, oh, no, we don't want this. Well, then we did forums and, and I was one of the no panelists, and I'm explaining the traffic studies and why this is a bad deal for the Woodlands and why the Woodlands needs to vote against it and this sort of thing. And at some point I go back and talk to County Commissioner Court before the actual election, which would have been in May of 2015, saying, hey, you still have time. You can actually, we've talked to JD, because you're actually only voting on the package, you can all agree to take this line item off. No, not doing it. And so we're like, okay. Well, as I'm walking out, you know how you hear from God different ways, right? Yeah. So I'm walking out of County Commissioner's Court, and I think one of the actual this is Julie Turner was the first person, and she was president of the Texas Patriots PAC, this Tea Party group that I was involved in. She goes, you should really consider running for office. And I'm like, no, whatever, I'm not doing that. And then the next day, literally the next morning, I run into one of the directors, John McMullen, and he says, you know what, you should really consider running for office. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Why are you guys ganging up on me?
Yeah, exactly. Did you talk to Julie? No, I don't, and I was just like, oh, okay, God. So then I was like, you know what? Why not? And I don't know really what possessed me. I can't tell you that like I had this burning urge, but it just was like, my personality is, I'm not just a joiner. Like I don't have to be the leader, but I want to be part of the leadership team. I want to understand why decisions are being made. I want to have an influence on them, and I was like, what I did. And so we're talking about now how to go about running a campaign. I can't tell you the value in knowing your elected officials, your local huge. Elected officials. I mean, if they're already in office, they won, which sounds kind of stupid to say, but honestly, they won. So you might go and sit with them and have them quiz you on, what are you ready to do? This is what it takes. Are you ready to do that? Before you just go out and start your campaign, don't announce you're going to run before you've actually spoken to some people and gotten their wisdom, and, find the ones you trust. You don't have to talk to every elected official. I talked to our county constable. I talked to our state rep. I talked to a few of the directors because that was what I was going to run for, was one of the board of, since we're not a city, we're basically a special purpose tax district. So we have a board of directors, and so we run for positions and it's nonpartisan. And so I was, so talked to a few of them. What do you think? There are 7 of us, and one woman was leaving. Peggy Houseman had served for a million years. And so she was leaving. And within our board, we have a chairman, and he's voted on. We have a chairman, a vice chairman, a secretary, and a treasurer, and all those are elected within the board. Yeah. And so the chairman at the time was Bruce Toth. Now, okay, pause there. So you meeting your current elected officials, even if you never decide to run, but man, you don't have to be their best friend. You don't even really have to like them, but knowing them and complimenting them when they need it, criticizing in private when they need it, or even if you have questions, hey, I don't understand why you voted this way, and they'll tell you, and then you go, okay, I understand all the constraints that I wasn't aware of before. There's huge value in knowing it, and I don't mean it from you get stuff out of them, but
it just makes it so much more. It makes you so much more impactful, just even as far as your knowledge goes. You get to know a little more of the inside scoop. You become a conduit to help get information out to the other folks within your network. You get to understand like I said, the constraints that they're operating under. Sometimes it's a response or rationale that you buy that you think makes sense. Other times you're like, I understand why I did it, and I still don't agree with it. But right. You're actually able to build relationships there. And that's important both for you and the community.
And one of the things that I preach constantly is, and I haven't done it lately, so I'm going to have to go on a rant soon, is, and this is what I've learned now being on the inside, most people, especially at the local level, who run, I think, I'm not saying all, we're not all saints, but most of us that run really do want to help. Mm-hmm.
It's thankless. When you sit out, you're going to make enemies of about 50% of your community, if not more. You're not getting paid a penny. You got to go do a lot of extra work and put up with a lot of BS. You've either got to really believe you can climb the ladder, or you got to be in it to truly impact your community for at least what you think is a positive end.
Exactly. And so we complain a lot about, they got in office and they're doing none of the stuff that they said, or, they've been there for so long and they only cater to special interest groups. Well, here's my insight into why. When you're running, you have a lot of really good people pouring in a lot of wisdom, right? They're telling you what they think. I mean, you're getting more advice than you can even handle. Some of it is very well-meaning, and you're like, that won't work at all. But thank you so much for telling me, And then you win, and then everybody disappears.
Yep.
And you're left all by yourself. And it's just you and your thoughts. And then you get somebody that knocks on your door and says, hey, you could really help me do this thing. And boy, you want to help people. And all of a sudden, you're voting for building a new daycare center, totally subsidized by the government. We don't do this, but you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because you're helping a group of people that asked for help. You're doing what you wanted to do. So we cannot, it's a shame that we turn our backs on our elected officials once we get them in. We work really hard to get them in, and then we just walk away. Well, and
so
done.
much of that happens when we're talking about getting these tough things done. Like when you're trying to follow through on those important campaign promises that you said you would do, well, you're one voice, and you need support. You need people showing up to give testimony, to just show the flag type deal. And
come to
when they're
public
not
comment
there,
and say it.
Yeah.
It's so much more like I can tell you from my perspective, our board listens to public comment more than we listen to each other. If we have 50 people that are signed up to all talk about the same topic, only like 4 of them will actually be able to talk, but we get it. It's important to the community. Yes, but I could rally for something all day long, but if it's just me, whatever. But if you get 50 people that are not me, but that are voters, and it's clearly important, because you tend to extrapolate, right? Well, if there's 50 in here, there's probably got to be 5,000 out there. But so the reason I think why we see our politicians drift over time is because we walk away from them. We stop feeding them, we stop pouring wisdom into. Praying for them is really nice. Talking to them in person is even better. It just is, and it can be very simple. Hey, because most of us are we consider ourselves public servants. We will make time in our day to meet you for coffee, even for just an hour, or whatever. Come to your office. Like I swing by Constable Gable's office, not often, but I'll just call him and say, hey, we haven't met for coffee in a while. He and I think we contract a few of his things out, but other than that, we have no reason to interact.
Yeah. But it's just a friendship. It's a relationship there with somebody that's one of your elected officials. And which,
I expect that I'll quit doing what I'm doing before he will. So, it's just, anyway. So, so I decided to run, and I can't even really tell you why.
But at that point, just so I'm clear, so you had helped run a state senate campaign. Mm-hmm. You really hadn't been terribly involved in the campaign side. You've been involved a lot from the, in those intervening months, helping, pushing issues and speaking out as an activist. But that was really that and a few conferences were really the sum of your experience. You just had built a network. You'd built some knowledge base in your time working that one Senate campaign to run off. Mm-hmm. And then you'd really got educated on those local issues through kind of getting thrown in the deep end with the bond package. So now you decide to run. You've got Julie and a couple other folks talking to you about it. So now you're in the deep end.
So now I decide to run. And I would strongly encourage anyone that's even thinking about running to be part of a campaign first, because there's a lot that goes on that you can't learn any other way. And actually for me, it was very helpful because some of the stuff that we deal with at the township level actually is affected by the state. So I would go to all the forums that my candidate was attending, and I would hear all 3 candidates speak on these issues. So I wasn't just learning from Steve, I was learning from Steve and Brandon and Gordy, and I was seeing different perspectives, and I was listening to their arguments, and I was learning how to debate. Right? You don't do that in engineering school. Well, you don't have to, so there's all this kind of extraneous stuff that you learn that you would never learn otherwise. It's not enough to me to be qualified to run. You need to be prepared, right? anybody can do this. That doesn't mean you're good at shooting a gun. You can wiggle your trigger finger. That's not hard. It's there's a whole lot more to shooting a gun than just wiggling that trigger finger. But at the bottom, at the end of the day, it really just comes down to that. So
yeah, there's a whole lot of difference between being somebody that would be really great, be a really great public servant if I just snap my fingers and put them in office, and being somebody who can actually win the campaign that precedes being sworn in and executed that office. And that's something where, we talked to Connie Burton, a mutual friend of ours, on the podcast a while back. She learned so much through helping on, Matt Krause and Matt Rinaldi and Jonathan Stickland and Ted Cruz and all these races where she was just a volunteer and helping out. And she learned so much from being involved in those campaigns and through going through some of our campaign training and being prepared for all that when it came time to run, she knew a little bit of something about the campaign. She learned a lot more through her own race, but by God, she knew a lot more than most folks about how to run a campaign because of those previous couple years of experience.
Exactly. And what you're getting into. And so, because, you'll find some people that are like, I had no idea it was going to be like this. And it's like, well, you should have.
Yeah.
So anyway, I decide, so this is a testament to my personality, but also a little wisdom was in there. I decide to go after the big dog. I go after the chairman position 7, and Bruce Toth had been the chairman for 5 years, which was, loosely the equivalent of a mayor. Not really, but, he's the head guy.
Are these all at large or by district?
Yeah. Nope.
So these are all at large. So citywide, which is about how many folks?
We're 110 people, but we're only like, a fourth of that voters.
So
right?
110,000, but you get 25% voter turnout's really high for a municipality. So that's.
Oh, yes. We were getting like 8% turnout. So, and this is an off-year election, right?
Oh, yeah.
We were begging people. I think the only reason why people came out this time, our particular race, was because it was, the underdog versus the champion kind of thing. It was it was controversial. It was fun. Yeah. But, okay, so it sounds like I just went after the big dog because I could. But he had actually, in 2014, so Steve hadn't run again for his state rep seat. So we had 2 new guys that were running. One of them was Bruce Toth and the other was Mark Keogh. Mark Keogh worked at, either something with Lexus dealership. I don't know exactly what his status was. And he was a pastor at a church. He was a relative unknown. I hadn't even heard of him, and I had run Steve's campaign. And Bruce Tough's dad helped build the Woodlands. The Toth name is relatively, known. But what he did, when I saw Bruce lose, I realized and recognized that the dynamics of the community had changed, because we had a whole new development build out on the south side on the Harris County side of the Woodlands. We're actually split over 2 counties. It's called Creekside. All new people who were moving in. They weren't the originals, right, that were moved in the early 80s, maybe late 70s, and had raised their kids here, knew the Toughs. These were the new people.
Yeah, the name did not mean what it used to. Right,
exactly. And so it was almost kind of beautiful because his name was so ubiquitous, it didn't really stand out anymore. And, and then also what the community had proved in the May bond was that they were more politically aware and they were more politically conservative than I think people were giving them credit for. So
you guys won that race, is that correct? Or the bond?
We defeated the bond.
So you killed the bond. So you're riding on a win where you were a key actor, and so now you're able to parlay that win and what you learned about the culture and the community and the way voters were feeling into going around on the November seat for this November 17 election.
Exactly.
Nice.
I was riding that wave, right?
Yeah.
The catastrophe in campaigns, what I've learned is you don't want to peak too early.
Absolutely.
Because, then you start falling off. So I ran a very grassroots campaign. I think I contributed about half of the money from our own personal account, and then I raised another $5,000. So we put about $10,000 into the race. Bruce had easily $40,000 plus some.
So how many votes ended up being cast in this race? Just so we get some perspective on how many folks you're going after.
I want to say 6,000-7,000.
Gotcha. So 6,000-7,000 people out of 110,000. So you're looking at about a 6%, 6% turnout, something like that. And so you knew generally, so we got about $10,000 to go after these folks. It's going to be a very strong grassroots campaign.
Well, and then about 5,000 of that was out of my pocket was paid to my marketing guy, because I knew nothing of push cards and yard signs and T-shirts and all that design. I'm, again, engineer. Well, I don't know. So anyway, and I ran a very, like you say, grassroots campaign. We have a friend in town who's very tech nerdy, and he had this whole voter database that he's been compiling for years for Montgomery County. So we were able to, he would pull block walk lists for us based on categories such as how many, so we really optimized, because I only had maybe a cadre of 3 dedicated people that wanted to block walk, and I was one of them. Mm-hmm. And so we narrowed it down to, had voted in at least 3 elections over the last, primary and general over the last 3 years, and multiple voter households. So my block walk list was maybe 3,000-4,000 people, maybe. But right. It was, when you've got 3 people and you're trying to hit 3,000 houses, that was a stretch. And, and so then it was really, pounding the pavement every day, and not even every day, frankly. Anybody that's going to run, you're going to run into that issue of, I can't talk to people today. And you feel kind of guilty.
There's
but
some of those days.
Yeah, you feel guilty about, like, I'm going to lose because I didn't go out today. But, frankly, you would rather hit 5 people and be fresh than hit 15 and be, it leaves an impression.
Well, and part of that struggle is that you've got to figure out the right balance between working yourself to death. Because up until GOTV starts and early voting, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. Nope. And I remember Dr. Byrd, who we just helped get elected here in Fort Worth to the city council, beat a 12-year incumbent. And a couple weeks out, right before we started early voting, I was asking him, it's like, hey, Doc, how you doing? What's going through your mind? Are you taking good care of yourself? We're nearing the time in the race when we're supposed to kick, but you got, how are you feeling? Are you sleeping? How's your family time? And he did a really great job throughout a 6-month campaign of pacing himself and making sure he was getting the sleep he needed, he was getting the time with his family he needed, and getting that recharge time. And he knew that was not robbing his campaign, or that was making sure he could actually finish the darn thing, because it was going to take a lot of work yet. And so he was great about that. And it's a hard thing to do. And sometimes, like I said, you feel guilty about it, but you got to take that time to rest yourself and make sure, because if your family is suffering, if your dog is sick, if you didn't get enough sleep that night, you're not going to be on. And the voter you're talking to is not going to feel that connection. They're not going to feel like, hey, I know Laura. That's the thing that I was hearing from all these candidates, or all these voters, as they were coming up and getting ready to vote for Dr. Byrd, is he had knocked on the door and spent a couple minutes talking with him. Mm-hmm. But their takeaway, they didn't tell me, hey, oh yeah, I met Dr. Byrd. It was like, I know Brian. And that's what you cultivate. That's your goal. And if you're all frazzled and you can't keep your eyes pointing in the same direction, you're not going to make that connection.
No, and they're going to want to run away from you and be like, oh yeah, I remember that dude. He came and knocked on my door. I think, who's the other guy running? Yeah. So I actually kind of likened. I organized a lot of my wedding, and I likened running a campaign to doing a wedding, in that there's a flurry of stuff at the beginning when you decide to run. You're doing all the push cards and all the design, and you're doing all the, all that kind of, getting invitations and deciding the invitation list and all, so block walking list and really getting organized. And then, because, we talked about you don't want to peak too soon, you really have to kind of judge how soon, based on your race, you want to start block walking. I know my community, and we're a family community, which means we're school-based for the most part. People are school-based calendars. And if I start block walking any time before school started, and honestly, even in the first 2, because this is very hyper-local, right? You're talking 6,000, 7,000 voters. If I started too soon, even with the seniors, if I started too soon, I would have lost, a couple of hundred people, just because I don't need to meet them in July. They're not voting until November. Elections aren't even on their radar, but you have to time it, right? Because you don't want to wait too late, because then you're killing yourself. So you kind of have to map out in your head that optimal time of block walking. I didn't want to be block walking when I should have been standing at the polls, right? And that's the 2 weeks before school, or before the election. So, back that up. And then, started block walking in, I don't know, September timeframe.
Yeah,
And then
September
also,
sometime.
you end up being invited to forums, and the first forum was intimidating. And the hard part in our area, we're very kind of establishment grassroots kind of still. Like it stunned me none to watch this last presidential election when they're like, oh my gosh, there's this huge, chasm between establishment candidates and grassroots candidates. And I'm like, where have y'all been? This has been going on for, years in Montgomery County.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
And especially, I think in Texas in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being at forums, it's a little intimidating, and you're probably not going to do well in your first forum. Carly Fiorina is a perfect example, right? Her first debate, it was like, but her second debate, she'd learned. And so
you just learn so much from that first trial. I mean, It doesn't matter how prepared you are until the lights are on and you're up, whether that's a small crowd or a big one like Carly faced. It's a different ball game than you've anticipated before. And you should prep heavily. You should get quizzed on the issues. You should have people running through the ringer. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's your first fight, and you're not going to know what it's like until you're looking up at it from the canvas.
Right. And you can't judge your campaign by that.
Not at all.
Your job
You're
is
going
to
to have
go
those failures. You're going to have rough times. There are going to be questions where you wish you would answer differently.
Yeah.
The best you can hope for is just to not make an unforced error. Be prepared. I mean, try to play error-free ball. You're not going to hit home runs every time. You're not even going to hit base hits on every time you go out, whether it's a forum or a block walking time or a phone call to a donor. It's just not going to happen. But this is a law of averages deal. You got to get out there, you work hard, you practice the fundamentals, and you focus on error-free ball. And if you do that, you're going to be able to make up ground a lot faster than the other guy. Trying to hit home runs on every forum is a good way to end up on your face in a lot of cases. I mean, trying to get too smart by half, that's a problem that a lot of people run into.
That's going to bite you hard because you're going to make some blanket statement, and then you're going to get quoted in the newspaper, and then your opponent's going to use it against you, and then it's just going to and there's no recovering from that. So what I did, and I did it with every forum that we had. I think we had 4. I'd listen to the other people's answers. And in my mind, I'm processing. Does that sound right? Does that make more sense than what I'm about to say? And I take notes even in that kind of thing. And my favorite forum, we were at, older people vote, right? And we were at there's a neighborhood in the Woodlands that it's 55 and older. It's houses, and it's a residential community, but you cannot buy a house there unless at least one of you is 55 or older. They're trying to keep it, no kids and that sort of thing. And that's how luxurious the Woodlands is. We can just,
they don't want anybody on those lawns.
No. And so I remember they asked, and frankly, this was the people that were organizing it were very biased towards the establishment type candidates. And so they asked the question of, can the Woodlands be a township forever? Because we actually have a Texas legislature designation that is unique to Texas. No one else has this. And we can collect property tax. Whereas we were collecting homeowners association fees before. And we also have a regional participation agreement in place because of our extraterritorial jurisdiction that keeps us in the same ETJ with Houston and Conroe and Shenandoah, and then I guess Oak Ridge North. And we, meaning the township, back in 2007, signed an agreement with Houston and Conroe that said, please don't annex us and we'll pay you money. And so we paid a down payment to Houston of $16 million, and then we pay them approximately, it's a percentage of sales tax, but it works out to be like $1 million a year of protectionist fees to keep us from getting annexed. And then we pay Conroe and Shenandoah some as well. And so that was the question: can we do this again? Basically the question is, can we sign the regional participation agreement again? Because the state doesn't care if we stay a special purpose tax district as long as they get theirs. And so my opponent stands up and he's like, absolutely. Because he had a bad habit. I learned this from Ted Cruz. My opponent had a bad habit. You see how I keep doing that? My opponent, right? Rather than saying Bruce Tough. I beat him 2 years ago, but I still am like, my opponent said this. You never give him free press. So he stood up and he's like, absolutely. This is the best way to govern. We have the best community. It's the best. It's the best. It's the best. And I had learned in the forums, and this is by watching Ted, just say what you think. And don't worry about making friends with the people that you know aren't going to be your friends anyway, right? Because most of the places we went to, the Bike the Woodlands Coalition, they were very establishment-oriented. Chamber of Commerce, again, establishment-oriented. Older people area, establishment-oriented, for the most part. You're not trying to win those people. You're trying to win the people that are like, I know nothing about anything. You know, that just decided, well, I'll go listen to hear what they have to say. And they really are coming, I wouldn't say with an open mind, but just like a clouded mind. They don't know. And so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to say the truth. And some of it's perception, but so he gets up there, absolutely wonderful community. We think it's great and wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And I stand up and I look at the audience and I'm like, absolutely not. And I'm like, we have one state senator. We have one state rep. The city of Houston has 5 state senators and 25 reps-ish in the area. I said, we have a lobbyist for our community. They have lobbyists from the county to the city to that all would love to have our $120 million property tax income. They would love to have that. There is no way that you can convince me, and I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that, sure, Houston will happily sign this agreement again. I said just their firefighter pension issues alone would prevent them from saying, sure, we won't annex you. And I think, the best part was watching him kind of slump over, you know, like slump down, like I should have said that, because I was telling these people the truth. Like I was laying out the, you know, look, this is the lay of the land here. Yes, they can absolutely see that you're not blowing up their skirt. You're really literally saying, I'm going to tell you something that I think you might find unpopular, but it's true. Yep. And you can go look it up afterwards, you know.
And when you got done, it wasn't like you were trying to be, you're trying to tell them something they didn't want to hear. You were just being honest with them, and they could tell, look, she didn't want to say this. She knew it wasn't politically, a great thing for her to say this, but she was willing to tell me the truth. And that, I would imagine, even with some of the more establishment folks that liked Bruce, that at least resonated, saying, hey, Laura is actually a stand-up person. She's actually willing to do some take some hard hits here to tell us the truth.
And the fun part was I think people, given that he'd lost in 2014, I think people were looking for a reasonable, viable candidate to vote for, but mostly so that they could vote against Bruce, right? I don't say that I won as much as he lost. I mean, there were some people that voted for me, but I think a lot more of it was a protest vote, right? Of, you know what, she's actually smarter than I expected, so I'm just going to vote for her and see how it goes. I'd rather her than you. And so I did have one blessing and unexpected blessing, we'll call it. So Bruce ran a social media campaign. He was very funny. Don't do this ever, please. Know your social media platforms. Hashtags don't work on Facebook. It's meaningless. So he ran a Facebook campaign and he started putting hashtag I love the Woodlands. And I mean, the dude has been in the Woodlands for most of his whole life, and especially his whole grown-up life. But he was running around to everything, taking pictures, selfies. I'm here with the soccer team. I'm here on the waterway. Gosh. I'm here on the this. I'm here on the that. I love the Woodlands. I love the Woodlands. Hashtag I love the Woodlands on Facebook. And it was just lame. It was dumb. I'm convinced he was kind of running, not only desperate. If you were paying attention, I mean, for people that liked him, they're like, oh, he loves the Woodlands. I'm like, we all kind of like it. We live here. But I'm convinced in some ways he was still running sort of a rep race as opposed to a local race, right? Because there was this, it was like he was just shooting too high every time. And at one point, this is the kind of happy, unfortunate situation for him, which was so beautiful. So on one of his Facebook posts, I don't know what it was. I didn't really care. It was some video. Well, one of my supporters gets out on his Facebook post and says, well, I'm supporting Laura Fillault. I didn't ask her to do this. I didn't even know she did it. I stayed far, far, far away from his social media. I wanted no engagement with him whatsoever. I was running my race, right? And I was staying in my lane. And I didn't do shots over the bow or anything like that, because in our community with the May bond, people had already had a pretty bad taste in their mouth as far as this kind of ugly politics. And so I was like, I'm not going there. Sometimes it works. It wouldn't have worked in our campaign. If I had been ugly towards Bruce, I would have turned people away. I needed to be positive, happy Laura, who's going to make changes, as opposed to look at him, he's so evil. And so, so Sherry posts on his Facebook page, just in the comments section, right? Well, then this man named Ron Sikowski gets on to argue with her. And one of his comments was, look, Laura seems nice and all, but what in the world does a full-time mom know about managing multi-million-dollar budgets?
Oh, gosh. Wow.
It was the most glorious statement of the campaign.
Yeah, that one will backfire.
Oh, so beautiful. So, okay, a little background on the Woodlands. I would venture to say 85 to 90% of the moms, those full-time mommies, stay-at-home moms, have college degrees and probably worked
Right.
before they quit their job to support their family. Yes, we can all manage budgets, even if they have a couple extra zeros behind them. So Sherry replies back of like, is that just all you think about her is, she's just a mom or something like that? And he writes back and he's like, I'm sure she's perfectly nice, but you're an idiot to believe otherwise or something like that. Well, of course, screen cap happens. And I kind of wait at first. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he said this. And so I don't remember exactly what transpired, but like it started to become, at first I didn't shop it around because again, I'm going to run this clean campaign. But then I took that screenshot and just sent it out to a few of my supporters. And I said, look what's going on. Go see if it's still on Bruce's page. And it was. And here was his fatal error in this. Instead of getting out there and saying, this is not the kind of campaign I want to run. I'm sure that, Ms. Fillault is perfectly qualified for this. However, I think I'm the better candidate for X, Y, and Z reasons. He leaves it up there and doesn't comment on it. And he leaves it up there for days. So at some point, I created a Full-Time Mommies for Laura Fillault Facebook page.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. And, and Michael Quinn Sullivan loves this, that I did this. So I post it like the next day, I think I post that screenshot of him making his comments. And I'm like, oh, so you think I'm just a full-time mom? Well, let me explain to you who I am. And I'm just like, typing. I'm like, Texas A&M, industrial engineer, worked for Bell Atlantic, Johnson & Johnson, Australian tax office, ExxonMobil, multi-million-dollar projects, went to France, learned French, got my French driver's license, came back, did this, Fort Bend Junior Service League president or secretary on the board of directors, just laid into him. I'm like, and yes, I'm a mom and I love being a mom and my kids are outstanding. And, so I just, beautiful. So
teed it up just perfectly for you.
Oh, you couldn't have asked for this, right? It just would have never happened. And so I get a phone call within like the week and my friend's calling me and she's like, oh my gosh, have you seen Bruce's video? Because he'd done these videos and they were terrible. I'm like, no. And she goes, I kid you not. She said, he's sitting at the kitchen table with his wife and he's reading off a script saying that he supports moms and stay-at-home moms and his wife is a mom. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like when senators get caught with their mistresses and the wife is standing there dutifully while they say, I'm sorry that I had, whatever. And so not that I think that was the deciding factor, but it definitely, here's a base that he didn't realize he was messing with. That guy, Ron Sikowski, he kicked a hornet's nest of moms.
Yeah.
Who were like, I'm sorry, excuse me, what? I mean, these are PTO presidents. Frankly, in the Woodlands, the moms run this place. Our schools in the Woodlands are outstanding because we have very involved parents. Now, are they a little too involved? Maybe, some of them. But, I mean, we've got some motivated folks here. And so that was it. I mean, the moms were just like, oh, never mind. And that's not something you can count on in a campaign. But, boy, if you see that happen, capitalize on it.
Well, and you were smart in the way that you went after that. And it wasn't an immediately jump on it. You took the time to think through how's this going to play out. Don't be opportunistic. See how he responds, because he could have responded in a way that would let him pick up yardage. But when he dropped the ball and didn't do that, you said, okay, well, his inaction gives me the opportunity to take some action. And you didn't just go all in at once. You didn't get over your skis on it. You play this out in your head, the engineering, thinking it through. Right. You figured out, okay, I can do this, and if he does this, this, or that, then this is how we'll respond. and it worked out really well for you. It obviously, helped out some degree and probably provided some very welcome momentum there in the last couple of days.
Yeah, definitely. And the other beautiful thing that he did, which is a minor fatal error, is around the Halloween time, he sent out a mailer that said, "Don't fall for Larfio's tricks this Halloween." And I'm sitting there going, yes, free publicity, because he put my name out there. Yeah. Well, anybody that got that cared would be like, who?
Yeah, who's Larfio and what tricks is she trying to pull? I'm going to do some research.
Exactly. And then they find out that I'm like this, mom that's, has nothing to do, because there's a big issue in the Woodlands of the development company still plays a lot here. And so, they're, she's not with the development company. Oh, hang on. So, I mean, there was some of that as well. He's giving me free publicity that way. But at the end of the day, I would encourage anybody that's doing any sort of local or state rep, or even, frankly, state senate race, county commissioner, anything less than a U.S. race. But even then, still, block walking is essential. If you want to win, you have to block walk. Period. The end. No arguments.
Absolutely.
You're foolish if you think you don't. And it's intimidating.
It does so much to give you a firm connection to make sure you're grounded in what the people on the ground actually care about.
Right.
It gives you that unvarnished truth as far as, not what the consultants or polls are telling you people care about, or what the newspaper and the editorial board is saying people care about. This is like from the individuals. And when you go through your district and your community and you talk to these moms and dads and sons and daughters and grandmas and grandpas and people that have big houses and no house and that rent and that live in a shack, when you get that kind of cross-section, no pollster is going to give that to you. But when you talk to these people, you're going to know what those precincts and those neighborhoods and those small little streets and hamlets actually care about in a way that no one else can communicate to you except for the person that cares about it.
And a handshake and a smile go for miles.
Yes.
So I worked the parking lot for the polls. And again, I hated it because it's intimidating and it's scary. And you've got all the other person's supporters out there. And I mean, we would even there was a little bit of jostling going on even. I mean, it gets kind of intense in Montgomery County because we're all Republicans. So it really is like, it's establishment versus grassroots. That's the competition. We're not even at the Democrat Republican level. Democrats don't run here, essentially. So I remember, and here's the other thing for potential candidates, that you will be astounded to learn, even on an off-year election, the number of people that walk through that parking lot and don't even know what they're voting on. Couldn't tell you what was on the ballot. They are doing their civic duty to go vote, and they'll figure it out when they're standing there, I guess. I don't know. I stood, and it was a little bit later one evening, and I remember, and I was looking at this guy, and, I take advantage of the fact that I'm kind of a cute blonde, right? So I can do the big smile, but not really approach and be like, hey, how's it going? Do you need a voter guide? Or whatever, And because I had the Tea Party voter guides, and they endorsed me or recommended me or whatever, so I was doing that instead of my own stuff. Because then I would just point to my name and be like, and that's me. And I look at this guy, and he walks over, and I kid you not, and this is how I was raised. Firm handshake, not overly aggressive even for a girl, but I'm not doing the girl handshake, right? I'm like, right. Firm handshake, looked him in the eye. I'm like, howdy, I'm Laura Fillault. I'm running for township. And he looked at me and he goes, I don't know who you are, what you're voting for, but you have my vote. That was an amazing handshake. And I'm looking at him, and in my brain, I'm going, you're a complete moron. You have no idea what I stand for anything, but you took me on a handshake and a smile?
That's Texas for you right there.
Oh my gosh, it was great.
I wonder if that happens anywhere other than Texas, by the way.
Right, seriously.
I tend to think not, but I know it happens here in Texas.
Maybe in the South in general, but yeah, no, definitely here. And you get a lot of respect by a handshake and looking them in the eye. Yeah. Not intimidatingly, but just like, I recognize that you're a person.
Well, we had a Dr. Mark Campbell on a few weeks ago, who is TED's national political director. And one of the things we were talking about there was that in a conversation at 3 a.m. in a diner in Iowa, he talked with this diner waitress, and she said, what I want is I want to vote for somebody who's like me, who shares my values, is smarter than me, but doesn't act like it. And just in that one moment, in that little bit of time, you get to communicate that you have something in common. You both value that eye-to-eye connection, that handshake. And really, there's a lot of those intangibles that at least Texas folks will rile into that, as far as being who you say you are, being trustworthy, being honest. A lot of those intangibles are wrapped up in that couple seconds of interaction. And so that told him what he needed to know. He's like, this seems like a very nice individual who is willing to look me in the eye, who's not afraid of who they are, who's confident in their own skin, and is willing to get out and make those tough introductions. And so that's really a remarkably large amount of information to communicate in those few seconds of that interaction.
Right. It's literally him walking from the car to the, because we have that 100-foot radius. So you can't breach that. So, I mean, you've got, I'd guess 10 seconds, and also another thing that candidates need to understand is you don't have to talk to everybody. Look, don't be that guy. If they're walking and actively avoiding because it's intimidating also I remember hating as a voter, all the people screaming at me. Vote for so-and-so.
Yeah.
I'd be like, just leave me alone, dude. I'm just going in to vote because I found it very personal and private. And I still do. It's just a sacred thing that we have an opportunity to do. So if they're walking very far away and you've smiled and you've acknowledged their presence and they're looking at you with the silent middle finger, don't be that guy. Don't go talk to them. Give them their space. And that's okay. It's not necessarily a lost vote.
Yeah,
you
just
don't
wave
know.
and smile. I mean, that's what you're doing. We were actually this last weekend in Dr. Byrd's race here for the Fort Worth City Council. I was standing polls, and I was actually at the same polling location with the candidate that we were running against, the incumbent. And it was one of those things, those can be very tense situations, or you can make them, fairly congenial. It was one of those things we decided, screw it, we're just going to be nice to each other. And it had been a tense campaign, but from the moment he showed up, I just shook his hands. Hey, Councilman, how are you doing? I literally we were out in the hot sun. I had a pop-up sunshade. It was me and him, the incumbent, and one of his guys and some other guy from the campaign. We just sat there, and we were pretty much, on the other side of the parking from, people were parking between us and the polling location.
Right.
So all we could do, we sit there, we'd wave at folks while they came in. If they wanted to say hi or ask a question, they'd come over. But, we didn't try to chase these people. We both were smart enough to know that whatever the die was cast at this point, we were just kind of there to make sure that the other campaign didn't pull any shenanigans. Right. That was the bigger purpose of why we were each there. But we just smiled at people and showed the flag, and that was good enough.
There are some campaigns what was really interesting. So there were 3 positions open. We run it 4 one year and 3 the other. So we're the 3, and so it was me and 2 other slots and. Mine against Bruce was very tense and ugly even, right? Where his campaign manager's trying to, do the whole kind of psychological, good luck winning because, it's really hard for, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, whatever, dude. What would be really interesting is again, establishment and grassroots in both all 3 campaigns. And it was funny to watch people, because you never know what voters are thinking, especially every election is different. Local races, you cannot predict every voter because there were at least 2 times when the establishment candidate for another position came over and said, hey, Laura, my friend has an Amos McDonald sign, which was establishment candidate for one position, an Ann Snyder sign, which was establishment candidate. They want your sign. So they were ready to kind of cross over to the other side. And so, like you say, treating those because I wasn't running against Ann or Amos, so I could be very nice to them. I mean, there was some tension in there because my race with Bruce was very tense, right? So you are kind of being friends with the enemy sort of thing. But at the same time, you don't be that guy that's ugly. And more importantly, if you hear that one of your volunteers is being that guy, tell them not to show up anymore.
Yeah.
Because they are hurting your campaign.
Yeah.
They really are. And it may be a hard call, but make it and be like, dude, I appreciate your energy and I really appreciate it. But you either have to tone it down or I need you not to go out there because you're making people mad. And that's the last thing I need. And I get it. You're totally enthusiastic and you want to win, but we can't win this way. And, I would have thrown it back to the road bond and said, people are tired already of ugly politics because that road bond was a county level and it was ugly. And they were done with it. They were done with that. Don't be ugly anymore. I'm not interested in that. So working the polls, though, I will say, and I didn't work every day because there were days where I'm like, I can't touch anybody. I cannot shake another hand. I don't care. And you get demoralized. I mean, frankly, it's demoralizing sometimes where you think I'm losing, for no other reason than you're just tired and you're losing in your head.
Oh yeah. It's an emotional roller coaster.
And then the day of election, you work that poll all day long. Don't leave before the last voter walks through the parking lot, because that you don't know what the difference is between you and the other guy. So did all that. I remember driving over to my watch party, which had already started because, polls were closed, and I'm, wrapping up and pulling up signs and all that kind of stuff. And also that's something that most campaigns don't think about is you want that after the next day crew. Just have one or two of your friends that will go pick up all that stuff the next day. Yeah. Because the schools and all the other places get tired of seeing it. And you look like a responsible person, even if you've lost. And it just sets well with voters, right? They notice. Because all
done.
The parents.
It's been decided one way or the other. There's no reason for your stuff still to be out there, whether you won or you lost. Just clean up quick.
And all the parents that are in carpool line, if you do it like we do it at schools, they see who left their stuff there, and these are their schools, right? So it's kind of like you're trashing my school 2 days later. I mean, the next day nobody really expects to be gone, but the day after, come on.
Once it gets to Monday, just be done.
Yeah, just be done. So, then you go to the watch party, and that's the worst time ever.
Yeah,
because
you're
it
sitting
takes
there
forever.
waiting.
Yes, and I remember because they'd released early. Because again, I don't know if. I think maybe people were only voting for our election in the Woodlands. And so, there was nothing else on the ballot because, again, it's an off year, right? It's not midterms, it's not presidential. And so they released the early voting toll numbers, whatever, before when I was still in the car. So I had my friend Luke Bowen calling me saying, hey, you're 6 votes up in early voting.
Not 6%, 6 votes.
Yeah, literally 6 votes. And I'm like, I just want to throw up at that point, because I'm like, this is awful. But early voting starts a month out, right?
Right.
So
you got absentee, you got early.
Yeah, all that stuff. And so, you haven't peaked yet. So early voting tells you something, but not really.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's really hard unless you've had big shifts in the race in the last couple of weeks. It's really hard to tell what does that mean versus what might come later. I mean, you try to prognosticate, but ultimately there's, unless it's really, really bad for you, then you probably aren't going to be able to have a read on that.
Well, and I don't know about in other races. I didn't, because, you want to go back and look at voting histories, okay, and understand how things roll out. We were about 50-50. 50% of voters voted early, 50% voted on election day. Others did. So, we were looking I figured, okay, we're about 50-50. So I can either stay 6 up or I might be 6 down at the end of this deal. I didn't know. And then, so then things start rolling in. And it's a kind of a collective, we had a collective kind of party. So the 3 of us that ran all kind of were at the same place. And 2 of us won and 1 of us lost. And I watched and I observed my feelings and opinions about the loser. And I realized I admired the hell out of him. Yes, he lost, and he probably felt devastated and like a loser. I don't think anybody else in that place felt that way about him, because it takes a lot of courage and to run. Absolutely. And he ran a good campaign. His fatal flaw was he didn't block walk outside of his village until he waited too late. We're like, dude, you need to be block walking the whole Woodlands. You can't just carry Creekside and you win. And he was actually really close to winning. And if he had listened to us earlier, I think that, he might have had a chance. God had different plans for him because his job ended up moving up to Dallas anyway. So, there is some divine intervention in there.
Absolutely.
So if you run and lose, you are a winner beyond anybody else in that room that has never run, which sounds harsh, but you're throwing yourself out there to be picked on, to be said ugly things about. I wrote a blog post about this. Like, I think I finally sat down in February, and there's a quote that I have that says, if you run for office, this is my quote, if you run for office, people will lie, misconstrue your words, and call you names. Deal with it. It just is. It just is.
It sucks, but it's what happens.
Yeah. I had in that same forum, in the older people forum, Bruce was implying that I was saying ugly things about his wife and his kids. I couldn't have picked his kids out of a crowd. I really tried to stay very ignorant to his family because I wasn't running against his family. This was not a personal vendetta against Bruce. This was, I was running for his position. I was trying to kick him out of his position. I wasn't trying to destroy his family. So, that wasn't true. And, so you have to, you learn early in forums that you can communicate a lot through nonverbals. And so I kind of I looked over, I did a side eye to him, and then I just kind of rolled my eyes like, okay, dude, whatever. I didn't have to say anything, but that communicated everything of, seriously, you're going to go there? It wasn't like I got embarrassed or anything. I'm just like, okay, whatever. You just do that. You do that. I'm not going to say a thing about your family. I don't care. And so, it takes a lot of courage to run. It takes even more courage to run a good campaign that is above board. It's really easy to roll around in the mud. It doesn't seem like it would be, but if you're a person who thinks that it's like win at all costs, it's going to cost you in the long run, even if you win, because you're going to win, but you've lost because you've lost credibility with people who might actually be able to help you be wiser. And so that's not a good thing to lose. You want to keep those people on that, even like I have this one guy, friend of mine, Ed Bigman. Ed called me right soon after I said I was running, and he said, I want to meet you for coffee, which you will buy your weight in coffee by the end of the campaign, times a million. I don't know how many coffees I had. I kind of looked forward to lunches every once in a while. I was like, hey, maybe we can meet for lunch. I'm like, oh, I don't have time for that. I'm like, yeah, okay, coffee, sounds good. Let's shake it up a little bit here, people.
Let's change it around.
Yeah, seriously. So Ed sat down, and of course, I investigate him. Who am I meeting here? And he's all Bernie Sanders, all up into Bernie Sanders. And I'm like, what? He sat down, and the very first thing he said, I have a feeling you and I would not disagree at all on social issues. So let's set that aside. I'm a financial conservative, and I want to protect my property taxes, and I think you're the right person for the job. And I was like, okay, we'll stay with that. We never breached social issues once.
Yeah, we know we're never going to agree here. We're just going to stick to, but on fiscal stuff, we can be 100% on board with each other.
Right, and so don't, anytime I had an opportunity to speak to people, I remember, this one woman, she was San Francisco liberal. And she and I spent a good solid 20 minutes on her porch, on her front porch, arguing over why I thought the road bond was a bad deal. And she was misconstruing a lot of the things I was saying. And in the whole social justice warrior type debate, right? Well, you're,
nice.
I don't want to have another road go, oh, you're against roads. Okay, I'm not against roads. I don't think this particular road, and I don't think us paying for it. We don't like to spend money. Okay, but I spent solid 20 minutes with her. I was respectful the whole time. I don't think we walked away as friends. But if she was a voter and she's standing there, who's she going to vote for? The woman who spent 20 minutes with her, disagreeing with her respectfully the whole time, or this dude that never even bothered to come by her house? I don't know. I have no idea how she voted. I do know that just maybe even 6 months ago, somebody was trying to take me down on Facebook over something that I'd said or something, I don't even remember. And she piped up about, oh yeah, she wants to, she's against roads and whatever, something. And, this was his last election. And, which I wasn't involved in, but because I'm a director and I was supporting some of the candidates, then I became a target, and which was fine. And, she piped in, and I was like, I do remember having this conversation. I do remember conversing with you, and I remember that we had these kinds of discussions, and I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I appreciated you taking the time to do it. And the wind was completely gone from her sails, because then she's like, oh, well, I'm not saying, she started backtracking and defending what she was trying to, and I was just like, you kill him with kindness in some ways, right? And so I'd spent this 20 minutes with her on her porch. I was so annoyed and tired, and I didn't want to, but as soon as she opened the door and we started, I was just like, and it's on, So I think somebody told me, it maybe have been Steve, and I don't know how true it is, but every handshake and a smile is a vote. So if you get to, you feel awkward because you're like, hey, I'm running for office, and you feel like you're like this sleazy salesperson, and it's silly because you're not, but it's how you feel a lot of times. And your friends that are your acquaintances, I'm talking about the Boy Scout troop that you're involved in, and you don't know half the parents, and you never actually talk to them, but you know who they are. I mean, you kind of do the whole, hey, how's it going? See them in the grocery store kind of thing. Go up and introduce yourself and say, hey, I know we've actually never talked. My name's Laura, And I just want you to know I'm running for office. And if you vote, I would appreciate it if you'd consider me. Here's my push card. Here's my information. And this is what I've done. And Steve did it. And I think it's brilliant. And don't be scared by it because it's a different culture these days. I put my cell phone number on the card. Mm-hmm. And I actually will point it out when I hand it to people. I'm like, here's my number. Call me. That's my direct number. And, if you have any questions or whatever, 99.9% of the people will never call you because they think it's weird. And caller ID, and it outs them and all that kind of stuff. And so, but anything that you can do just to be, most people, like you said, they want a friendly, kind, nice person who seems confident in what they're doing. And they're like, sure, absolutely. They'll vote for you, not because they're not voting for you most of the time over policy. They're voting for you over personality.
Yeah. They like, hey, I like this person.
Yep.
And that's what matters to them. It's a lot more important that they like you as a person than that they agree with everything or believe that they agree with you on everything you're going to vote on. And, while we, especially as conservatives, I feel like we hope, right? We hope that it's about the issues. We hope that it's about our principles and the philosophy. And that's great and that's important and we are right. But the fact is when it comes down to the psychology side of winning votes, that what matters to people is they want to vote for somebody that's like them, that shares their values, that's smarter than them, but that doesn't act like it. And as long as you can check those boxes, like Dr. Campbell said, that's really where the votes are at. It's huge. And you obviously did a great job finding those people.
And sometimes, that whole smarter than you, but doesn't act like it. And sometimes, and Cruz is to me a perfect example, telling people what you think they're not going to want to hear, but they like hearing it because they don't like hearing it. But at the same time, okay, so she's going to, bicycle coalition. I stood up there and I'm like, I'm not ever going to say that I'm okay taking a full traffic lane for bicycles. And that's like the worst place to say this, right? But I'm just like, it's not feasible for our community. I understand your desires and I want to help you guys as best we can. And I'm not doing that. And that kind of thing, being able, because what they learn is they can trust you even when they don't like what you say. And trust goes a huge way for politicians because politicians are seen automatically as, like, I introduce myself to people and I'll be like, yeah, hey, I'm Laura, I'm an evil politician. And, and because they expect that. They expect you to lie to them. And so when you don't, it's like this, well, that's kind of refreshing. I mean, I think she's totally full of it, but I mean, wow, she actually said it. And so,
it's disarming. When you're able to go there and you tell them something that they don't want to hear, they know, while they may disagree with you and they may not want to vote for you because of that, it at least imprints in their brain, hey, she's at least somebody that's not going to shy away from telling the truth or what she believes the truth to be. And when you're willing to just, hey, own that whole, the politician side and just be, hey, I'm an evil politician, that's that's going to tell them something that, one, you're probably not, because if you were, you wouldn't say it. And two, she can laugh at herself. And those are both things that people like to find. And it's rare, especially in the political class. Right.
And so, and then you hear people complain about, oh, they're constantly running. Yes, you are. Because every vote that you make, you have to consider. You're not considering whether or not you could, it factors in, I would love to say you go in and you just vote it, I'm just going to do it. But there are some times when you think twice. It doesn't necessarily change your vote, but yeah, it affects how you vote because you're answering to your community and you're going to be held accountable to that. Not just in this vote, but in potentially, if you want to, the next election.
And that's the whole point. I mean, you should understand what your constituents want. And on some issues, it might be worth going against it because it's a principal issue. And you're saying, look, on principle, I cannot vote this way. I know my constituents are out here on this. I can't go there. And I'm willing to lose my seat over it. If they're that, I will try to communicate why I can't do this. But if in this cycle, they're saying, hey, no, you're out, it's worth it. You got to make that call.
Yep. Like for us right now, we have people coming and asking us for a homestead exemption. We don't offer that for the Woodlands. And there's a lot of reasons why we're a special purpose tax district and we get about a third of our revenue from property tax, a third from sales tax, and a third from hotel and occupancy tax. We can't afford, we're 23 cents on the 100. Now, we're 23 cents on the 100 because we don't own our own roads. The county still does that. we don't do water, the MUDs do that. So we're as fiscally responsible for all the amenities that we offer. We're as fiscally responsible, I think, as we can be to offer a 20% homestead exemption based on what we know is coming down the pipeline in 1 and 2 years from now, and especially not knowing how the legislature is going to vote on with the property appraisal cap, percentage cap. It's irresponsible of us to ask or to give a homestead exemption for us. Now, for the county, absolutely they should. They haven't raised tax rates in, I don't know, ever. And they're relying a lot on appraisal increases. Well, the appraisals are going up and they're hurting people. And, so that's an issue where, look, I'm voting no on a residential, exemption. And here are my reasons why. And you don't have to like it, and you can vote me out. And I'm okay with that, right? So yeah, it is this good check and balance. And then the other thing is, I find it entertaining because you'll get half the people that are like, oh my gosh, they're always in campaign mode. And the other half is going, we never see them.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't win. You will not please everybody. So just do what, like on Facebook is basically how I communicate to most of my constituents. I only have like 500 followers. And if there's something that I think I need a message to get out, I'll sponsor a post. It's like $20, and you get it out to your people and it proliferates some, and okay, great. It's you're not in constant campaign mode, but there's definitely that threat of not getting reelected. And again, like you're saying, it's not the threat of not getting reelected. There are some times when for example, the rotary clock, and nobody cares about this but me, but I'm like, ooh, I did that. One of our first votes, like we got sworn in November, and then January, it's not quite the same. So we get sworn in November. So like you win, and then like 2 weeks later you're in.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, wait, what? And so January, the Rotary Club had bought themselves this four-faced old-timey clock, and they wanted to turn it over to the township to maintain. And this was for celebrating the Rotary Club's 40th anniversary. And I'm like, no, you bought the clock. You maintain it. And people are like, oh, it's only, $5,000 every few years. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not asking taxpayers to take care of your clock that you gave yourself. I mean, I'm happy to give you the land. Okay. It's like, this little 3-foot square place in the park. Okay. But no, I'm not going to, I was the only one that voted no on the whole board. Everybody else is like, yeah, sure, we'll do it. I'm like,
you just hate fun.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just mean. And they're like, well, it's only $5,000. I'm like, then go raise it yourself. You didn't even bother to ask, like, if each of you had asked 5 neighbors, hey, can you give me $10? You ought to have had the money in like a heartbeat. But no, you wanted to turn it over to the taxpayers and have them pay for it. Okay, no. There was a moment in there where it's like, I'm never going to get reelected again because it's the Rotary Club, and I've said no to them. 2 years later, no one cares. And some people probably admired the fact that I was paying attention to it at that level of like, this is, I'm not even spending $5,000 on something that, yes, can we afford it? Yeah, we can right now. But should we? No. Like you said, people are mostly disarmed when you're nice and kind, right? Just be nice and kind, and you may not win. There are going to be some elections that are, people are listening to this, and they're going to do all the things that we're talking about, and they're going to lose. There's divine intervention in there that you don't even understand is happening. And also there may be some mistakes that you made, and sometimes it's just not you, it's them, whoever them is. Like when we ran Steve's campaign, we made some fatal errors. I'm not going to lie. But Brandon, who won, had like $1 million in the bank. We did not. All the goodness in the world and smiling and niceness couldn't overcome his ability to basically blanket the Woodlands with his name and face. And it just wasn't in the cards. And that's okay. I am very proud of the race that we ran. Win or lose, do it. Be able to sleep at night, be able to look yourself in the mirror the next day and go, I'm doing the best I can.
Absolutely.
And there are going to be some days where you're looking at it going, I actually texted a friend of mine a couple of meetings ago, and I was like, who the hell thought this was a good idea?
Yeah. Why did I think this was smart?
Right. I mean, who signed me up for this? Then I write back, I'm like, I know I did. Shush. You know?
I ran for office and I raised money and I knocked doors and did all that stuff so I could get this job.
I asked people to put me in this position.
Yeah. Well, I'm incredibly proud of the work you're doing, Laura. It's awesome to see good conservatives that I've seen on the activist side that have built those relationships and that are now stepping up, whether it's you or Connie or others that are willing to take that, because it's hard work. It's hard work. It's stressful. It takes time away from your family. It takes time away from your hobbies, which I guess politics becomes that one hobby. But at the end of the day, I'm grateful to have folks like yourself that are willing to step up. And so much of what we do at My Campaign Coach is focused on helping empower individuals like yourself. And I appreciate you sharing some of those lessons with us and with spending so much time with us today. It's been an absolute blast. And hopefully it won't be too long until we can talk again. But as we're wrapping up, tell folks where they can find you online, Twitter, and all that fun stuff. How folks can get in touch with you if they got any questions or want any advice.
Yep. So I spend some of my time, a lot, on Twitter, which my handle is just a little bit. Laura K. Fillault, so LAURAKF like Fox, ILLAULT. Same thing, Facebook, same name. Or Laura Fillault for Township is my township page. Email is the same at yahoo.com. I mean, I'm basically type in my name and you'll find it. Not very many of us.
Well, and we'll have all the links to that in the show notes. So folks can just click through go to the Campaign Coach website and click on the blog post and then follow through those links there. Laura, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. You guys check out the show notes for information, for quick links to different things we talked about, and we'll talk to y'all again next week.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from My Campaign Coach.